Are you ready to go ultra-wide?
Ultra-wide.
Today's video is all about the Nikon 14-24 f2.8G ED lens. Many people consider this lens to be a component of the trinity of lenses that photographers should have. Now, you may already know that I don't believe in the word should, but let me explain what these trinity people are talking about. The idea is that you would have 3 f2.8 zoom lenses in your bag covering the range from 14mm all the way to 200mm. One way to accomplish this is with the Nikon 14-24, 24-70, and 70-200. These are all big, heavy f2.8 lenses. On the surface, it makes sense. You've got any focal length you want from 14mm to 200mm with durable, professional level lenses. I want to mention a new site first before we get too far into this. It's thetoggle.com. What is it? Here's the site. They have some cool content for us photographers and gadget lovers, plus a whole bunch of other neat stuff. So take a look. Now let's get one thing out of the way before I talk more in detail about the 14-24. If having this trinity of lenses is important to you, then go out and get it. But if you're not sure, don't feel pressured to spend a lot of money on 3 lenses that you might not use very often. The most important thing that any photographer can do is to become acquainted with their own likes, dislikes, and artistic style, and then have the tools on hand to achieve the results that you are looking for. Simply having a range of focal lengths covered across 3 lenses has less magic than you may think. More on that later. Let's talk about this 14-24 lens and ultra-wide lenses in general. For starters, 14mm on an FX camera is wide, really wide. You're able to take an extremely wide-angle view and cram it all into the width of your monitor or print. This is a different perspective than you may be accustomed to seeing, and it can definitely be a love it or hate it sort of thing. Many people who try out ultra-wide tell me that their images feel boring. The temptation is to photograph a vast expanse to try to capture that magic in an 8x10 photo or to view on a computer monitor. And the reality is that this thinking may not make an interesting photo. Or it may. It depends on what you like. Here's what I like to keep in mind when shooting ultra-wide. Where do I want to bring the viewer's attention? There can be so much to look at in an ultra-wide photo that you don't really know where to focus your eyes. I do my best to find one aspect of the photo that I want to feature, and then I take advantage of the ability to get close to that object, which can make it look super big, and then the surroundings bring tremendous depth to the image. Now, 2 things. 1, I'm certainly not an ace ultra-wide photographer. It's something that I do infrequently, most often with my V1 and 6.7 to 13mm zoom. And number 2, you might like to shoot ultra-wide completely differently than I do. So if you try out a lens like the 14-24, be prepared to think differently and never be afraid to experiment with new perspectives. A photo that looks like an accident can be an important tool in developing your style with ultra-wide. It's fun to look at ultra-wide photos online to see what can be done and how other people approach it. I find it even more fun to grab the gear and shoot, and shoot, and shoot. The lens itself is big. It actually weighs more than the Nikon 24-70, and it's 2/3 the weight of the Big Daddy 70-200 f2.8. I can't emphasize this enough. The 14-24 is 2 pounds, or about 1,000 grams. This is literally the same weight as the D810 body and is heavier than the D610. It is, however, the large, durable lens that you would expect for the $2,000 price tag. Now there's something unique here, and some people don't like this because it's an f2.8 ultra-wide lens, so you have a bulbous protruding front element. There's a hood that's built in for a little bit of protection, and you have a giant lens cap to keep it all covered. You won't be screwing in any filters to this lens. You can't. There are third-party filter accessories for this lens. They're big, and it's definitely more stuff to bring around with you. For me, I don't shoot with filters very often on any of my lenses. Sometimes just clear glass filters when I'm going into harsh environments. I look at the 14-24 as a lens for filter-free usage, but as I mentioned, there are third-party contraptions available. The kits that I took a look at ranged from $250 to $400. So if you're into this lens and into filters, be sure to budget accordingly. The performance of the lens lives up to the reputation established by the 24-70 and 70-200. The images are sharp, crisp, and saturated. My cameras nor I had any trouble using the lens right out of the gate. We got along well, and the lens definitely craved the surroundings of Grand Canyon National Park. Now, the canyon itself is great, and I've shot the canyon with virtually every lens I've ever owned or borrowed. What I found myself doing with the 14-24 was shooting more indoors as well. Each time I go to the canyon, I walk through the Bright Angel Lodge, Cold Studio, and a few of the other buildings. Rarely, though, do I photograph interiors of these buildings. The 14-24 had me shooting indoors. It was actually quite addicting to bring small spaces into the frame. Now, with ultra-wide, you want to be careful where and how you point the camera. Perspective really comes into play, as does perspective distortion. I found that the lens itself distorts very little, but perspective really comes into play when you're close to something, meaning it's easy to have crooked lines and funny angles. Your positioning relative to what you're shooting comes into play here. Say, for example, you're shooting a tall building with an ultra-wide lens. The top of the building may appear to trail way off into the distance. This is because the lens has you shooting close to the subject. So the closer bits look really big and the further bits look really far away. And if you're shooting from ground level, this makes the base of the building look really big while the top looks really far away. For this reason, unless you're having fun and doing something unusual, this is not a lens for portraits. You may find that your subject will have a big nose and teeny tiny ears. To be clear, this is because you're close to the subject. From perspective, this is not lens distortion. Now, I probably just spent more time talking about shooting with an ultra-wide lens than the actual lens itself. Honestly, it's simply what you'd expect from an expensive Nikon lens. It does what it says it does, and it does it well. The real decision is whether or not you know if ultra-wide is your cup of tea. Maybe find a friend who has this or another ultra-wide so you can try it out. Or check out Lumoid.com where you can borrow gear for a few days to see if it's something that you'd like to do more of. Here's the tough part of the review. I like the lens. I really do. I also like the great outdoors, and I tend to carry my camera around with me all the time. I will hike all day with the 24-70, despite the similar 2-pound weight to the 14-24. The problem for me and the 14-24 is that I'm not an ultra-wide junkie. I might want to snap 2 or 3 ultra-wide shots in an entire day of hiking. In this case, that would mean carrying around an additional 2 pounds for something that I'll use sparingly. I usually have my V1 everywhere, which weighs very little, and the ultra-wide lens for my V1 is only 4 ounces. This setup, it's not the quality of the D810 with the 14-24, and it is a variable aperture zoom, not the continuous f2.8 aperture that the 14-24 offers. So for me, I love the idea of the 14-24, but not the practicality of carrying it with me for the occasional ultra-wide shot. Am I glad I borrowed it? You bet I am. 1, to make this review for you all, and 2, to get a taste of what it's like to work with the biggest, baddest Nikon ultra-wide lens. And that brings us back to this concept of the lens trinity, the 14-24, 24-70, and 70-200. They're all great lenses, and I do own 2 of the 3. They're expensive, but extremely durable, and they do cover a wide range, all at f2.8. They're a lot to carry, and the reality is that many photographers like me are happy to grab a prime lens or 2 and head out for a weekend of adventure. The range of zooms is nice. For me, the zen working with primes is incomparable. Now, I love hearing opinions, especially ones that aren't my own. So definitely chime in down in the comments section. Have you used this lens? Do you own it? Are you thinking about it? Or do you own one of the third-party competitors? Let me know in the comments. And be sure to check out thetoggle.com for a write-up on this lens and many other articles and information as well.